This is the Patriot Minute series. I'm Grandpa Rick. I want to talk about the evil empire and its American lackeys. I was the new guy. It was the early 1980s, and my boss was a desk officer within the Middle East Division. He knew his stuff, or so I thought. Then one day I made the mistake of quoting President Ronald Reagan. Someone had ventured in the office there to mention Reagan, our president at the time, in a positive, admiring way. Boy, this set my boss to grumbling. Then, right on the heels of that flattering comment, I ventured to opine, referring to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the Soviet Union that was still alive and kicking at the time, as the evil empire. Look out. In front of the entire office, my boss jumped down my throat. "You can't say that," he yelled. "Who's to say that we are any better?" I remember staring at this hopelessly jaded bureaucrat, dumbfounded. To me, it was obvious there was no moral equivalence between the United States and the Soviets. Zero. Nada. Khalas. And although I was young, I knew enough history of the Soviet Empire, of Lenin, Stalin, the systematic starvation, gulag death camps, show trials, summary executions, to know that my boss was out to lunch. In fact, I soon found out that there are many like him in Washington, D.C., corrupted by the Ivy League schools they attended, and then salted into every government agency, from agriculture to Veterans Affairs. And it's far worse today. At the time, I determined to chalk the whole matter up to the fact that this particular desk chief had never worked in the field before, and is certainly nowhere near the Soviet Union. He had come to the government directly from Harvard or Yale or some other ivory tower equally compromised. No real-world experience at all at the time, and this was long before the internet. Academia and academia alone had hopelessly compromised the man. Anyway, I put it aside and moved on. Still, such ideologically driven error is alarming, especially if the man was in charge of something important, such as our national security, for example. I was soon transferred to the field where I spent the rest of my career. And while I learned much from my university days and from living and working in Washington, D.C. at headquarters and in training and in other areas, in reality, life in the trenches, confronting a cadre of bad guys, is where the true learning begins. For me, all it took was an introduction to my first Soviet diplomat, to stare into the cold, dark abyss of those bottomless orbs, eyes that screamed of totalitarian brutality, systemic indoctrination. He was tragically and hopelessly jaded. Later, as I worked for the private sector in Russia, newly emerging from communism, becoming close to people who had suffered under Soviet tyranny, it became even more clear to me. I remember seeing my first Soviet gulag, or slave labor camp. The Bolshevik leaders of the USSR were indeed evil because their hearts were evil, their minds corrupted and immersed in lies, their souls diseased by a socialist totalitarian ideology, their history entirely rewritten by their own ministry of truth. They were forced by Big Brother to embrace a caustic narrative riddled with disinformation or desinformatia, seeing the world through the prism of a secular socialist cult that shackled everything within its grasp for the good of the people, of course. In their passion to pound the square peg of atheist Marxism into the round hole of God-loving, free humanity, they murdered many tens of millions and inflicted suffering upon untold millions more. By their fruits ye shall know them. Today in America, we are facing our own version of these cultural Marxists who call themselves progressives or democratic socialists, and unless we get up to speed and quickly, identifying their duplicity in our schools, universities, in media, in our government, to fundamentally transform this once great nation, we will soon find ourselves beyond hope. For we shall have all eternity to praise our Lord for America's hard-fought, wonderful liberties. But we've only got a few priceless, shrinking moments now to sunset, to save them. Stand with us, please. Thank you for your time and interest. I'm Grandpa Rick.